Welcome everyone to our session on evaluation and continuous improvement. We have here, if you can move to the next slide, Dr. Pamela Carter. She is an expert evaluator at FHI 360, and she will be taking you guys through a really wonderfully informative and thought-provoking session. Take it away.
Thanks. Hi, everybody. Yes, I am Pam Carter. I'm originally from North Carolina, a member of the Lumbee tribe there. Welcome. I understand we've been having a great few sessions and hope you've had a chance to enjoy and join in on some of those. Today, this afternoon, I'm going to take a few minutes and talk with you about evaluation and continuous improvement. It says within the grant management process, but I'm hoping that it will support you in some other areas that you're working on. But just for a second, just for me to kind of get an idea of who's here, if you don't mind, if you see where the chat function is on your screen, if you just kind of tell me who you are and maybe which grant you're applying from, that would be great. That way we can kind of get to know each other a little better. Thanks, Shannon. Yeah, and again, my background is in research and evaluation. It's the role I play at FHI 360, but I do a lot of work with other Indigenous communities, and really enjoy the idea of supporting the stories and the rich data that is often in Native communities that we don't always think about and don't always talk to. So hopefully we'll get a little better at that today. Great. So we've got someone from teacher preparation. We've got an ACE grant. All right. Hi, Carmelita. Good to see you. Okay, excellent. So you can keep looking at this. We'll see some others that are joining us. And that's awesome. I'm going to try to do what I can to have some of the questions directed to you and give you guys a chance to ask some back as well. Thanks, everyone. And Kelly, Chris. So our agenda for today, some of the things we're going to be looking at, we're going to think through the evaluation as a term in itself and think through all of the terms, define those, help you get a better understanding of what those steps are within an internal evaluation and understand what continuous improvement is, the importance of doing those things, some pitfalls and successes around them. And I'm hoping to leave a little bit of time for you guys to ask some questions as well at the end of the session. I always like to kind of start with framing things. And those of you that are evaluators or in an evaluation process, and it seems like we have several here, we like to operationalize things. We like to make sure we're all speaking the same language. And a lot of times grants will call for external evaluators to be in the grants, and that's probably the role some of you play. But there's also an internal evaluation process that's really important. So evaluation in general is just defined as making sense of something, right? Or adding a judgment or value to something or to a situation. When you think of it being internal, it's just that. It's situated inside that process. And then as we're thinking about improvement, it's making things better, moving forward with something. And most of the time that improvement, it suggests that we're moving in a right direction. That's what we hope we're going to be doing as we move forward. So I was just discussing the difference in your internal versus your external evaluation. As you see here in the top right-hand corner, it being internal is being fully immersed into the process, right? It's being a critical friend in that inquiry and what is happening within your program. Here we see the involvement of internal evaluation, the attention given to all that are looking at the same thing. This little close-up view, the one little fellow's got his little magnifying glass there. So no doubt they're talking about what they're seeing and they're participating in this process together. And so you've got this collective view as well as a very close-up view of what's going on. Externally, looking from the outside, sometimes you don't get to see all those things. You're not quite as involved, right? And there's careful observation of what's going on, but it's from a different vantage point, intentionally so. The little girl you see at the bottom with binoculars, she's observing from afar. She most likely is hearing some of the things, she's catching some of the things that are there, but she's not fully involved in the context of what's happening. She's not necessarily getting the specifics of everything that's going on, but she can attest to what she sees and from her vantage point, and she has a story to tell there as well. Both of these are important and essential information when you're looking into programs and you're trying to move your programs forward. And by providing that evidence about what works, and it kind of ensures you that you're on the right track of meeting the goals. And it sounds like we're meeting these goals externally, but keep in mind you're doing these projects because you have something that you want to achieve as well. So for today, we'll spend
Dr.
some time.
Carter,
Yes.
sorry to interrupt real quick.
No.
It looks like the slides are not advancing on the screen.
They will be in just a sec. Oh, I see what you're saying. They are not advancing. My fault.
No problem. Thank you so much.
There we go. So as I was saying, if you see now that you can see the screen, you see that up at the top is what we're talking about with the internal evaluation, right? So that they're all working together. The little girl, she shouldn't be such the spy at the bottom, but the external evaluation sometimes plays that role, right? They stay out of the picture. They're observing what's going on and getting that view, but it is a little bit of a different perspective. And apologies for not moving those forward. But today we're going to spend some time talking about what that internal evaluation process looks like and how you can use it to improve not only your overall objectives, but thinking through that project and through all your strategies along the way. So if you have the chat box there where you were telling us who you were, what do you think we might need to evaluate? What's some of the reasons for why we would even bother to do that? Just kind of drop it into the chat there. Why should we evaluate internally what is going on within our programs? Silence. There we go. Yeah, make sure the goals and objectives are met. Making sure we have progress. Yes. Staying on track, checks and balances. Perfect. You get the idea of why we do it. I hope we're going to share a few more ways with you. Formative. Yeah, boots on the ground. Effectiveness is a great word as well, right? I mean, we only get so much money to work with. We only have so much time, and being very effective at what we're doing is going to be helpful for us in the long run. Thank you, guys. Let's try to do a little poll here. So here's a question for you. And you kind of responded to some of these. So why evaluate? The first one, is it to tell your story, to report to a funder? Is it to show how you've achieved your goals, so to provide that evidence? Is it to reflect and modify your programming where you can make better decisions, or is it all of them? Get the poll up. All right, 100% said D. Anybody else want to go for D? Two more responding. We evaluate to tell our story, to evaluate to provide evidence, to make better decisions, all of the above. Folks are coming in. 2 more seconds. It's a test. We still have quite a few coming in, but I'll go ahead and display. Never done this before. Am I displaying? Do you see it? 100% of you are saying D, all of the above. Yeah, so internal evaluation allows you to use the information to support that you're doing from that internal perspective, while also providing information externally to the funder, right? It's for a different level. For example, externally, the evaluator may state that a majority of the students completed the project and exhibited excellent skills as a result of the work. Internally, you might know that these students learned a better way of communicating their feelings, learning more about how they work collectively in a group, how they build confidence with each other. Internally, you know them by name, right? And by their family, by the engagement, and it's more on that personal level. You have more of that context to what is going on. And on the level that will help you not only with building out those current goals, but it'll also help you grow and improve those communities in which you may not be expecting just through the process of understanding what is happening on the ground. Thank you for that. So moving a little further through here, we said, what's the need for it? So the funders themselves, yes, they need to be able to say something to their stakeholders, right? They need to have that information back to say, we spend our money wisely, and here's what folks are saying that they did with that money. You may think you were successful with the funds given to the stakeholders, but they have to provide that, and they need that story that you give to them as well. And then you also need to evaluate to help you determine whether or not you were successful, whether you were meeting those goals. And does the evidence that you come up with corroborate that story you tell? So many times, if we had, what we like to do in Native communities is we like to have time to sit and share a story with you. And a lot of times our funders say, you have 600 characters and you have to respond in that short period of time. So being able to give them that number, and then they go, tell us a little more, that internal space, sometimes it gives us that opportunity for us to share those stories. And then lastly, reflecting on how money was spent and what was accomplished informs those that are in charge for decision making. This kind of can speak to your sustainability as well, right? You may get funds to start a program and you show the program is working really well. If you have enough data and enough evidence to show that, then you can, respond to others and say, this is really working. Give us more money to continue what we're doing. And you have the evidence to support that. So why the need? So that we evaluate internally to prepare that story, to share the funders with others, to corroborate the numbers that are provided most often from that external perspective, and perhaps most importantly, for the information we get from these internal evaluations to make decisions on at various points. Carmelita noted earlier when she was talking about to be able to do that formatively as you go through the process and use that information to better your programs. So the title of this is, it was using internal evaluation for a continuous improvement process. Let's put up the next poll here. I believe this is a poll. It's not. Oh, I will go on. So kind of I want you to think through this process of what is continuous improvement. Is it gathering data systematically to report on a project? Is it stopping to reflect on how things are going and making decisions along the way? Or is it doing the same thing even though you're not getting the same results? Or is it all of the above? Let's open that question. There we go. Had a few responses coming on. What is continuous improvement? Give you just a couple more minutes. Okay, we have the majority of folks telling us that we're looking at B, continuous improvement is stopping to reflect on how things are going and making corrections along the way. We had a couple of people that are saying that it's also gathering data systematically to report on your project. Let's talk a little bit more about this and see what we think. So to continue to work, you want to make sure what you're doing is good, right? It's the best that you can do. So there's no need continuing to do the same thing over and over again if it's not right. So we've kind of eliminated 3 there. While gathering data systematically to report on your project, you should also consider what's happening with that on that continuous improvement piece. So if it's continuous improvement, you would also stop to reflect on it, right? And shift things as needed. So this was kind of a trick question. You couldn't mark 2 answers, but for those of you that wanted to, you did it the right way. It is not doing the same thing, even though you're not getting the results that you want. That is not the answer for this, but it is a matter of gathering the data in such a way systematically that you then comment continuous points in the process and take a look at that data and say, what do I think is going on? And how do I need to look at this to keep moving in a different direction? And this, I'll have to be honest with you, after I thought through the term itself, it took me to a Twitter post of all things a while back. As I think about it, is continuous improvement something that is against the grain of who I am as an Indigenous person? You know, what is it about evaluating and assessing and putting a number to something that, why is that so hard for me sometimes? It's so hard for us. It's like we are, and that is good enough. The Twitter post that I came across said, in Western cultures, we believe that we are alive for a purpose, to make money, to work. But for some Indigenous cultures, we believe that we're alive just as nature is alive, to be here, to be beautiful and strange. We don't need to achieve anything to be valid in our humanness. And I was like, oh man, but here I am in this evaluation world, in this world of looking at things to constantly assess and to think about it. And then I backed up and I said, but, when we think about this, we want to continue our way of life. And in doing that, we want to see our communities a place for our kids to thrive in their culture, in their language, in their history, and in their stories. We want them to be confident and happy and proud to be Indigenous. And I think we would all nod our heads in agreement to yes to those statements. But we are coming here as being funded awards to address the needs that we've actually surfaced in our communities. Needs that improve some aspect of our communities, such as addressing suicide rates, revitalizing or continuing our native languages, supporting the well-being of our elders, or reducing domestic violence and substance abuse. These changes, this improvement, doesn't just happen, and it doesn't happen overnight. We know that. So today's session, we talk about how we can look at that process as a way of thinking, right? And how do we work within our programs to address meeting our goals? How do we address the needs that we wrote up into the proposal? So we ask these questions and respond to them in our own proposal narratives. Do we embrace and live those questions as we implement our programs? Do we stop along the way and say, hey, how are things going? Are we moving in the right direction? Or do we need to make some adjustments along the way, or just stay the course? These pause and reflect actions are continuous improvement. That's what it is. They're continuous if we use our responses to those questions to adjust what we're doing to get us to that place where we want to be, that we determined to be our goals and our needs within our communities. So that kind of helped me understand why we do this, and moving forward in that process, when sometimes it's like, why are we doing this? Can we just report on it at the end of the day? Not always a good practice. So as we think about the continuous improvement, another way of looking at it, if I can get another way of looking at it is through this plan, do, check, act process. So we plan our work, and planning that and the evaluation happens early in the process to help us determine what we want to do, how we plan to do it, what our activities will be, what we expect to see. And we should be adding into that when we're going to stop and reflect on how we're doing and looking at those outcomes. If the plan is good, do and check are made much easier in that aspect. Do is basically following that plan that you put together, and implementing it as you've determined from your planning process. We're going to run this program for 2 weeks, and we're going to sit down as a group and talk about how's it going, what do we need to change. We're going to run it for another 6 weeks, and we're then going to look at all of our findings, and we're going to talk about it and do the same thing, and that's how you move forward. Those checks are just that. You sit down and you find those incremental points in time, those stages that make sense to you, to take a look at things and see where you are, assess that progress, and make your plan to either stay the course or make modifications to increase your outcomes. The act part, that's taking the comments and plans from your check and putting them into actions. Act is similar to do, but the actions actually includes those minor shifts and corrections that you've made as a result of that continuous improvement. And then you just kind of continue going back around. You make those changes, then you look at your plan. Are we still good? Do we need to assess as often for continuous improvement? Do we need to put them at different checkpoints? And you move forward. Let me see if I can give you an example of a continuous improvement. Let's say I had a 2-year program, was funding in our community to increase. You fill in the blank. You've got a 2-year project. What can we say 3 months into that program? How do we know if things are moving in the right direction? How do you know if you're achieving your goals? Will you reach the goal you set for yourself? Starting a project with that continuous improvement in mind helps us be able to answer those questions. So my example, I've been awarded funding to increase the number of youth that are engaged in cultural activities in my community. My plan is to have events at our local community center to invite students to come by after school to take part in a variety of activities. I count them as they come in. They do a little sign-in sheet so I know who all is there. Throughout the process, I'm observing how things are going. Before they leave, I ask them if they've enjoyed themselves and what other activities they would like to do during that time. So I use that data that I've collected to help me determine, hey, is it going okay? Am I on the right track? I note whether the same students are coming back in on the next afternoon. I note whether they're bringing friends with them. I add activities per their request. Through all of this, I'm looking to see if I'm increasing the number attending and to find out if they're bringing others because they like the activities. After each day, I ask them about those experiences as I did in the beginning. I carefully note that after they leave. I use that data to continually improve what's happening in my project. This is a simplified example, but I might need to talk to parents about bringing their children. I might need to make it a family event to get more people involved. I might need to make the events on Saturdays or not in the afternoons, not in the afternoons when there's a basketball game. Maybe I need to think about, other information that will help me get more people involved in that process. And all of that happens in that planning piece on the front before you start doing. And then you're checking along the way as you do, and you continue that implementation and acting with those changes you have. And then it's just a cyclical process that continues. So when we think about the processes as iterative, and they run parallel throughout your programming. So I would go so far as to say the reason for internal evaluation is to provide information to better make decisions along the way and for that next round, that formative information to help us make those decisions. If you're planning to go from the east to the west coast, there are multiple ways to get there. With some planning, you may start that trip while watching the weather. You recognize there's a major storm that's coming, which is probably happening in some of your communities now. So you may need to make a decision to change that route. You can stay the course, slow down your travel, but there are other options too. It might require you to stop and consider moving a totally different way, right? So you don't go blindly into anything that you do without making decisions, and they need to be conscious of what those outcomes are going to be as you move forward. So it's not as foreign as we like to think it is. So you should do well in your projects if you act, reflect, make the decisions on that reflection with data to support it. Continue what you're doing, reflect again, review those, and it's just a constant repeat cycle that gets you to what someone said earlier, a very effective mode of running your programs to where you're getting the best, spending your money wisely and getting the best outcomes that you can get. So we've talked a lot about what the continuous piece means. And as I was going through this process and wanting to talk with you guys, I thought it was really important just to bring up what that actually looks like when you do an internal evaluation that is then used to help you think through the process as you move through your program. And so I wanted to share with you some of the ideas and some steps that you actually need to think about. So as with continuous improvements, there are also steps in evaluation, as you see here. But the strong evaluation plan, these steps that are on the that are not on the screen, that should be on the screen. My apologies. There we go. With the strong evaluation plan, the steps you see here, you can communicate to your team what is expected. They will know what they're supposed to be doing at what point in time and when that happens. And with a shared understanding, a conversation about how these things are going can bring to surface any challenges that are going on and help you address them before they become too problematic. So the graphic shows the connections here of the two. while you plan, you're setting those objectives and you're considering your approach and your outcomes. You're even determining some of those outcomes at that point. Then when you do, you're implementing that process, right? And you're collecting data to help you be able to know whether or not what you're doing is what you intended to do. When you get to check, that's the time you're analyzing the data in those different cycles that are going on, and you're reviewing those. What are we finding? That act stage, you've reflected on it, you've made decisions, and you're trying something different in that process. This is basically how you think about your internal evaluation for continuous improvement. So as I was saying earlier, you can't know where you're going. You can't really get there too well if you don't have a plan. Maybe you can just take off and go, and that's the way some of us like to think. But you really have to have a plan as you're thinking about this for a program and involving others. You most likely know what you want to implement. You see the problem, and now you have to use the knowledge and experience that you have to change those outcomes and improve that situation right within your community. You should sit down, write down what it is that you want. What is it that you want to achieve? That happens in those early stages, right? And then you need to think, so if I'm looking at this 2-year program, what would I be expecting early in the process? What should happen if I think about this 3 months from now, and write it down? What should be happening midway through this process? Where should people be at that point, and where should they be at the end of the project? This gets you to a space to actually then be able to think about, what should I look at when I move to those incremental pieces and start thinking about whether I need to change paths along the way. So let's use that example that I came up with earlier about, I wanted to start an after-school program in my community to support, let's say, language revitalization. What are some objectives that I might want to reach? If you don't mind, just take a second. If you were doing an after-school program in your community to support language revitalization, what are some of the things that you would want to put in there as your goals and your objectives to reach? Take a second to do that. Thank you for writing the question in there for them. We've got an after-school program to support revitalization. Yeah, someone started with the very perfect answer. Yeah, you need the curriculum, right? If you're wanting to start this language revitalization program, before you have anyone coming into the process, you need to know what it is that you want to work with them on. Thank you, Chris. Yes. So we have our language revitalization curriculum in our hand, which probably tells us the age group that we want to work with. What are some other things that we need to think about as we build out these goals and objectives? Yes, recruiting the participants. How many teachers are we going to have? How many students can we take in? What if they're find out whether we have language and cultural experts to be able to come in? Yes, that one's big. That helps us once we have the curriculum to know who's going to do the teaching. That depends on how many participants we can actually then recruit into our process. Finding out if those that are willing to come. Yes, these are all things that get us on that front end piece as we plan and as we think about it. So we're determining the need. Great. So let's say now that we have decided we have 4 elders that are cultural experts that are willing to come in and work in our after school program. They're willing to give us a couple hours in the afternoons, and they're all fluent speakers. We then need to determine, okay, what age group are we working with? How many students do we think that they can work with each? And then we need to start thinking about things. What will it look like when they're working with them? How far will they get along within 6 months or by the end of this grant? How do I want to set up my metrics to be able to determine where they are? Oh yeah, these are great responses. Thank you. So you have your goals and objectives plan, you're thinking about what you want to do, and then you've got to go through what that approach is, right? And this is what we were just talking about. So there's a lot of parts to your approach. What do you do? What do you plan to do? We plan to work with these people, but we've got to figure out who it is that we're going to be working with, that's going to work with us to implement things. How is what you're doing going to improve the need that you're trying to address? The last thing you want to do is get someone in there that is not a good teacher, or that you don't have any support with the kids, and it just turns out to be everyone falling apart. You have to think about how you put everything in there together so that it works well, right? The steps that you need to take along the way to make that happen. Maybe you have it one-on-one. Maybe you realize 3 people is better than having one. Through this process and with talking with the speakers and those that have had the language classes before, they can help you find out those that information. Yeah, Carmelita gave a good example of it. Something you may want to think about. Will everybody be able to ask and answer a question in their language by the end of the first year? That is just definitely something that you could go, yes, we've worked with students and they've gotten to this point, and you know that you've achieved that goal. So considering our example of language revitalization in this after-school program, what are some ways in which we could assess how our participants are doing? What does the data collection look like? So what are some ways that we can assess whether or not, let's use Carmelita's example there, whether or not that the students are moving forward and being able to ask and answer a question in their own language? What are some ways in which we can assess that? And please feel free to write in the chat your responses here. I really wish we could just kind of talk all together, but this might be the best way to do it. If there are multiple ways to think about, how you can collect data, and I'll put a few on the screen here. So you can do, you can have a log, yes, many assessments, oral check-ins. You can observe the process and have some sort of a checklist that you mark off. You can have small conversations with students and ask them, what they're learning and how far they've gotten, and ask them to share that with you. So there are multiple ways of considering how to collect data. In our particular case, I like what we have here around those just mini assessments and oral check-ins. Rubrics, yes, thank you, Linda. I was just about to say that. I worked with the Jemez tribe a couple of years ago on a language assessment, and I quickly hopped in and said, sure, I'll help you. And my job was around the assessment piece, and we had a language person with me. And we get in, they say, our language is oral, we have nothing written. And I'm like, wow, okay, how do we do that? But we were able to sit down with them and ask these very same questions. What would a person sound like if they were completely fluent? And let's keep using that same example. What if how would we know that question and answer, everything was where it should be in the perfect part of the language, if they're fluent in what they're saying? So they talked that through, and we said, okay, well, we know what it's like if they don't have any of the language, they can't say a single word. What would it be like if they're kind of getting there? And they sat through and they created language to say, if they don't, and these are not the exact words, so forgive me, something along the lines of, if they don't hesitate as they say that first word. And then it's like, they can make a couple errors, but they recognize those errors and are moving forward. So they came up with a very discrete language that they could use to assess where their children were in becoming fluent at various points in time. And they kept saying, why are we going to use this? And then a year later, they were like, we can look at this, and then I can hand it to the next year's teacher, and she knows where the students are in a process, so she can do a quick assessment and keep moving them forward within their language. So that is just one example. So thank you, Belinda, for that on the rubric. Lots of ways to collect data. But probably the most important part is having that plan of how you're going to collect data, a plan for how you're going to review it, and then what you're going to do with that. So if you collect attendance sheets and then you never put them in the same place, or you don't check to see if, as I was saying earlier, the same people come, or different people are coming, or more people are coming, or so many are late, all of those things can help you think about whether or not what you're implementing is being implemented in a timely manner. So the outcomes, this is what helps you determine success, what it might look like, right? And this is what we were saying, think about it in the short term, midway through the project, and by the end of the project. Make a conscious effort to have an outcome at increments along the way as well, right? So use the model we were talking about here so that you can see where you are, be willing to make those changes along the way as you're making that journey. Because if you wait to the end, which is what a lot of us do because we just get busy, and then you say, oh, I need to put together a report for this grant, then you're just running around trying to find data, and you give them something that is not really useful to you. It fulfills your deliverable for the grant, but what would be helpful is when you do that, it's efficient and it's effective for you too, that actually helps you then look at those outcomes and go, yes, we did a great job, and this is how we want to continue this work. Collecting the data, that's what we were saying too. Having those tools ready are very important. It doesn't have to be burdensome. It's on that planning end that you decide what it is you want to collect. And then you know what is happening at each stage along the way. It still allows you to tell that descriptive, that story that you need. But one of my favorite things to do is say something like, my language program that I was doing after school. When the program started, we had 5 people that came. By the end of the first year, there were 25 people, and most of them had attended at least half of the classes. For example, this child came on day 1 and knew none of his language, and by the end of the year, he was able to tell me who he was, who his family was, and in his language. So you get that great story behind it. And sometimes, unfortunately, all our funders want us to know you had 5 people and now you have 25. But to us, what is important is what were the actual changes that happened? And is this something that we can continue to, in my case, improve that language in my after school program? So with the program laid out, we have some understanding of what we want to do. How do we see participants' progress and outcomes we would like to see happen across the program? So we're now running a program to collect that data in such a way that helps us decide, whether or not our progress is what we want it to be. So that incremental review helps us make those decisions on whether to change, ramp it up, or revise it. This is using data to meet your goals. This is continuous improvement. So there are many tools to help assist you with this, and I'm willing to talk with you. And I see several evaluators on this chat that I'm sure for those of you that are not evaluators, it would be glad to help you think about ways to collect this data so that you can use it for your continuous improvement as you move forward. The analyzing and discussing the findings sound like a lot of work, but again, it all depends on the plan, how you set it up on the front end. We don't need RCT studies and quasi-experimental studies in everything that we do. What we do need to be able to do is to say we're seeing changes and we're seeing progress in what we're doing. So looking at the findings can help you both interpret, what is going on. For example, if you see a big gap in participation during like your second week of the project, someone that is working in the program may have told you, hey, there's a snowstorm that shut down all the operations. So that kind of helps you know what that is. So the data analysis is best done often and with those who actually were a part of that process. They understand that context of what is happening there. So analysis needs to be collected and reported in such a way that you can have a meeting to discuss it. As we saw the picture of the kids earlier, all of them looking at a particular something on the ground, right? They were meeting together and looking at that and making decisions about what was going on. You do the same thing with your work. So the analysis is a proof of what is happening. It's your story that shares the results of what is going on in your projects. And as you review these in early increments, you can honestly reflect and make changes And sometimes the results will even be stronger than you even knew you could get to. Doing this early allows you to catch up and progress in ways that will help you meet those goals and not, start losing at the end of the grant going, oh my goodness, we've got to get more people signed up. You will know that along the way. Looking at that analysis often with a group of people that are working with you. So that reflection, as we talk through the findings and individuals are providing commentary on why data look the way they do, they can take time to reflect and think about things. So this is the time to systematically say, what went well? What could have gone better? If we could change something to improve it, what would it be? And is there anything we could add to improve our process in our questions? So honestly, looking at your outcomes and making those plans to continue the good work and adaptations and revisions to support that don't always turn out so well, but sometimes they continue to improve, and that's where you want it to be. But what happens if you don't do a good job? So you can actually, if you don't ask the right questions, you can get answers, but they may be totally the wrong answers, right? And if you ask questions but don't pay attention to the various ways in which people can respond, you may not be getting the best answer that you could get either. And the last one there, if you don't collect data in such a way that you can even answer your questions, you don't always know what to do with them when you get there. And that's where we are a lot of times. So planning is important. Setting up a process for looking at data is critical, but there could be things that come up that are extremely important that no one sees because it wasn't part of the data collection process. Sometimes things come out of left field they may be important. So I'm talking both sides here. So you need to have that process so you're watching what's going on, but you also need to be open to think about those additional things that may be there that a keen eye sometimes finds in the process, because those too will impact your program, and having more than one set of eyes sometimes is helpful at being able to see those things. All that will kind of help you to avoid gathering data that you can't necessarily use or that doesn't help you answer your questions. I'm going to try something. I'm not sure how well this is going to work. Here we go. All right. This is an example. Now, here's what I'd like for you to do. I'm going to play the video, and I want you to listen to what they're telling you to do. It's about 39 seconds. So if you can have a way to start telling, I will tell you that's part of it. I hope we have sound. Let's give it a go. Do you have sound? There's no sound on this part, so you're okay. Just count. Particularly the white basket with the white basketball, the white shirts passing the basketball. All right, how many passes did you count? We were looking at the person with the white shirts passing the basketball. Was anybody able to count them? 9. Yeah, I think I got 10, 14, 11, 14. Good. That's what I thought was the answer. Somewhere around 12 or 14. This is another reason why you have multiple people do it, right? Because then you can sit and go, okay, well, maybe I like some of the folks with the question marks, kind of getting close on it. Let's see what they say here. 15. None of us got it right. Did you see the gorilla? Let's back into it and look at it again. There he is. So, yeah, sometimes when we're looking for things, and I should leave that there for a second for the research part. Sometimes when we're looking at things, we're so engrossed in this. And a lot of times when I do it, I'll make it a little more difficult. So I'll have people counting the bounces or bounces versus just passing in different ways. And sometimes we get so engrossed to the actual count that we miss something as simple as a gorilla walking through the process. And it's not unusual for people to say no, but this is what we need to think about. That's what your evaluators and your observers will take a lot of time to try to catch things within the classroom. But sometimes this stuff happens and we just don't see it. And a gorilla running through the middle of your process and your program is probably something that you do want to think about. So sometimes in our effort to answer the questions, we may miss something that's really big like that. Having the multiple observers will sometimes help. As we noticed here on some of the responses, we had several that saw it, and then we had a few that didn't. That gives you a chance to talk with your team about it. Go, wait, what did you see? Or how many did you count? So that you can have that conversation and then make the best judgments as how you move forward with things. Yeah, we could use several ways of thinking about that. As I said before, you could count the males and females. You may have them look at things different ways. But at the end of the line, another good response here is a single observation of a few seconds shouldn't be what you use to make a judgment on anything or any kind of accurate perspective. So having multiple people look at your project, whatever it is you're doing, and having multiple people sit down and talk about it allows you to have different perspectives and get to a much deeper response when you're collecting data. That was just kind of for fun. I hope you enjoyed it. So we talked about what happens if it's done poorly. More importantly, what happens if we do a good job at this? This is where we want to be. We want to be successful at achieving our purpose of the project, and we want to get there. We want to get to our results. That's why we wrote this up. We saw there was a need and we were given funds and were allowed to do this project so we could reach those needs. It's good if we can do it to where we can replicate it with others, right? So we can continue the program with our communities after that funding is gone, or reach out for more funding to allow it to continue. So if we set things up appropriately, if we're collecting data in such a way that it can be, we call it sliced and diced, you can look at it in multiple perspectives. That's always helpful. You may want to look at those that have attended over half of your events, as we were saying. You would need to have something that actually connected that individual to the event to know that they attended half of them. You may want to know if the boys learn things better than the girls. So by capturing gender and age or things of that nature, you can check with various what we call types of demographics of people. You know, did the younger people do a better job? Did the older people, were they able to get it done quicker? Things of that nature. So looking at things incrementally also allows you to see where the success is occurring. If you're running a 3-year project, you may not see the light bulb come on until the last 6 months. This lets you know that there's much prep to get you to the goals where you're needing to go. And if you find that you plateau after that first 6 months and you're continuing on that path with little growth, it may not be efficient use of dollars and time. And you might want to adjust your activities and goals to stretch to further heights to actually address more. And to see where folks are at various points in time, we'll give that information. But most often it's useful if we consider, using that and thinking about what that looks like, not only in that project, but you can use that information to help us as we move to the next project as well. And if you spend your time on the front end, making a plan for it, ensuring that there's a responsible role of collecting and organizing data, you will find you can respond to your program officer with much more details and assuredness. You won't be running around trying to get to people and go, oh, give me those sign-in sheets. Oh my goodness, do we know what happened there? Just give me some information. It'll all be nicely put together. You will have been thinking about it for the entire process. And then whatever you turn into them is a much more thoughtful and probably much more accurate and a better view of what is actually happening on the ground in your programs. Number 4 there stands by itself. A planned process will yield stronger and more useful results. And at the end of the day, it will save you time and energy as well. So it's a journey, and we learn along the way. Taking time to reflect and look at what has worked and what hasn't worked tries to keep us on the right path. I trust this presentation has provided you with some food for thought on how to think about this, how to move forward with an intentional mindset for creating that plan, setting those objectives that are obtainable, but also move you to your end goal. By implementing that plan, using it as a roadmap, and stopping at appropriate times to think about what is going on, reassess. Checking your progress along the way, so looking at that data and considering whether or not you're on the right path, and moving at a good rate to get you to your goal. And then acting upon those findings to change directions as needed to continue to improve your projects. Use the data to make informed decisions on changes that might be necessary to achieve those goals. So the objective of continual improvement and continuous improvement is to keep progressing. As you progress, you ultimately will reach that long-term goals. The arrow suggests that this is a cyclical process. When you get a handle on the how and you're able to sustain these projects and continue to improve, those outcomes from your community will do the same. You'll not be perfect the first few times you do it, but you'll be better off than you were by not collecting the data at all. So why does it matter? We all want to think about using data and internal improvement for the process, because we can actually think about that as a part of helping us improve our communities. We come to this work and to the project because we have a deficit. The funding for this work has an end, but being able to find efficient and cost-effective ways to address these challenges will help you continue to work once funding is gone. If you achieve your goals and outcomes as prescribed, you can also see the results to reach out for other funding or continued funding. Taking time to plan, taking time to collect data during your implementation, taking time to analyze and reflect, sowing the seeds, achieve your goals, your stated goals, and improve your intended outcomes. And you assess them along the way, water them when needed. Having that data showing how you are nurturing your program is important to have others support your cause. And then you're reaping the benefits. Carrying out that plan, nurturing will help you get there. It'll help you sustain and help you help the members of your community. So thanks for your time and for all that you're doing to improve your communities. And I'm always willing to help out and help people think about what that looks like and support communities as they look to achieve those goals, whatever their projects may be. And as I said, there are several evaluators on this call. That's what we do, and we're happy to share with others any of the knowledge that we have. So I appreciate your time today. Thank you. Do we have a few minutes to take some questions, I believe? If anyone has any.
Yes, we do. We do have a good amount of time for any questions and that people have.
Talk a little fast.
No, thank you. Really stimulates a really great discussion. Thank you, everyone, for sharing.
Okay, there's a Q&A section. If there are any thoughts or any reflections you want to put into the chat, we would be happy to continue the conversation here a few more minutes.
I actually have a question, something I've been thinking about. When it comes in the sustainability, it's a big goal of all of our projects that, after this grant ends, that this program would have made a lasting impact, or even better, be able to continue after the grant funding. How would you, but sustainability is something that you might not, be able to really measure until after the grant. So how does the continuous improvement and evaluation process, how could that help in, planning for program sustainability?
Sure. I think sustainability is something that we all too often leave out. But when the whole idea of getting additional funding is you don't have what you need to get a job done. So you're asking for funds and you move forward with the project. You go, wow, okay, I can get this project done with this this help that I have here. And the idea of collecting that data and looking at it on a process, at one point I talked about, if you get to where if you're 6 months into it and you hit this plateau, then maybe that's where you need to stop. So next time you can ask for funds, or you may not need as many funds to get you to that plateau. Having that data that you collect and look at on a continuous point allows you to figure out where those places of a lot of growth is, or probably more importantly, it helps you be more efficient and more effective, and you find places where you may not need as much time for something, or you may not have needed 3 people, or now that I have that curriculum built, I don't have to build it out again for the next round. So sustainability can be anything from the tools that you actually create that you don't have to create a second time. It can be the curriculum that you don't have to, for your implementation, that you don't have to create the second time. And then through that continuous data, you are actually able to be more efficient and be able to address some of those pitfalls that you did in that first round that you wouldn't address the second time. So it would make sense that at least wouldn't cost you as much to do it a second time. And then a lot of times, if it's, we call a return on investment, you will find a community that will say, hey, we can spend this much money to move us forward in a positive direction. Or if we don't spend this little money for this is what it's going to cost us on the back end. So having that data allows you to make those decisions. And what I would like to think is help us move to a level of sustaining things in such a way that they are become part of that community and part of the normal costs of a community to move forward in a positive direction. I hope that answered your question.
Yes, it did. Thank you so much. And we do have another question in the chat. Do you find that reviewers of grant proposals evaluate in a similar way to what you have described?
Do I find the reviewers of grant proposals? Well, so first of all, this will be totally my opinion. I do find that when I review grants, I take it very seriously because I put a lot of time into proposals when I write them. And I try to carefully pay attention to all the questions that they ask and try to put it all into my narrative. So the same thing to me for reviewers, as they review them, they should evaluate in a similar manner. But I think that's just a hard question, Carmelita. Thank you for that one. I'll get you later. But I do think that the ones that I've participated in, like with the IES type grants, more of the larger federal grants, there is a process of training that you go through. And as long as you are a strong evaluator and you pay attention to the review process and go back to that every time, I would like to think we're pretty close. And yeah, I would like to think as reviewers, they do a similar process as well of looking at things. I would love to entertain that conversation later. Well, I will say one way to become if you want to write more proposals and win them, is to agree to be a reviewer, because that gives you an opportunity to look at what they're looking for. And it helps you see both sides of the puzzle. So.
Thank you. Please feel free to ask any other questions that might come up. In the meantime, I'll just share a couple of reminders. But again, if you have any questions that come up, feel free to continue to put things in the chat. Our closing keynote is going to start at 5:45 p.m. Eastern time. So no, depending on wherever time zone you are in, but you'll start at 5:45 p.m. Eastern time. And that will be our last session for today. And of course, thank you for putting up this slide. If you have any questions or follow-up, you can reach us at oie@scisservices.com and take this last time to chat on the discussion board, share all that you have learned and thought about and discuss these past 3 days. And the slideshow will be in the resource library. But thank you, everyone. So this is not our last session for today. We do still have one more keynote session after this at 5:45 p.m. Eastern. And thank you all so much for engaging in such great conversation and sharing all of your thoughts on our discussion questions.
Thanks, everyone.